Welcome everyone to today's webinar, the last in a three-part monthly webinar series presented by the PCA Residential Forum. Today's topic is trends in the painting industry. Before we begin, I'd like to touch upon a couple of housekeeping items. Everyone will be on mute during the presentation to eliminate any background noise. During today's session, if you have any questions for the speaker, please type them in the chat box, and we will answer them as we move along through today's webinar. Now, may I introduce today's presenter, Emily Howard. Emily Howard is the editor-in-chief of APC, a publication serving professional painters and painting contractors since 1924. She joined APC in 2008 and has served in multiple roles. She loves listening to and telling the story of painting contractors. Ladies and gentlemen, Emily Howard.
Hi, everyone. Tony, thank you for that wonderful introduction, and Residential Forum, thank you so much for having me. As Tony said, APC, American Painting Contractor Magazine, has actually been around since 1924. And before I get off the camera and get into the presentation, I just always like to show this is our very first volume right here of American Painting Contractor that you can see is from 1924. And what we've got on our very first cover, it's the January 1924 issue, is this beautiful can of pure white lead paint. So we've been through an awful lot of changes through the years, and I think that will help us in 2020 because it's definitely been an interesting one. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my camera now so that we can focus on the presentation. But here we go, 2020 Trends and our Operations Survey Preview. So when we first started talking about this presentation, I think I talked to Tony and Suhaiba and Diane about this back in December of last year. I thought, gosh, this is going to be very easy. Our operations survey will just be coming out. We typically talk about trends in our November, December issue anyways. And I created this little opening slide here, this really super clean, all the lines heading upwards, little opener slide for everybody. And then March hit and things definitely changed a little bit. So I updated the presentation to do something that I felt like more accurately reflected the trends of 2020. And here it is. So a lot of you might be looking at this and thinking, yep, that's what 2020 looks like. There was a lot going on. Nothing seemed to be running in any single direction. But actually, this is just what everybody's walls, I think, look like after 8 months of having children in the house. So that's, interestingly enough, actually kept a number of contractors really busy. But honestly, like, I don't really know what I would have done if we wouldn't have had our operations survey. We do this survey every other year as a way to kind of keep a pulse on the industry, to find out what the trends are, to get just a better view of what's happening. And I have to say, leading up to starting the operations survey, we of course talked to multiple contractors as COVID hit in March and April, and we were dealing with just lots of different things. And I don't think that I could have really grabbed any single trend that made sense for everyone. I mean, the truth is that COVID it really hit everybody very differently. We were getting tons of conflicting stories, you know, depending on your location, depending on your service type, your cash reserves, depending on your employees, depending on your customers, your health status, the health status of the people around you, you know, and then what each individual county was doing. COVID really affected everybody quite differently. So I have to say, when we started this operations survey, I think we opened it back in August and we kept it open until actually just last week. I had checked the results almost every day because I was just so curious to see on more of a quantitative basis what people were experiencing in the industry. Now there's a couple of slides as we move into this, and this is I think Tony said if you have questions throughout this, please just type your questions into the comments box. Normally we hold questions to the end, but because there's actually a lot of data on some of these slides, I'd be really curious if you have questions throughout. Please go ahead and ask those questions as they come up. But so like I said, there's a lot of data in some of these slides because we decided to actually kind of take a step way back. Typically when we present these results, we present them and we compare them to our previous survey. But because 2020 has been such an anomaly, we decided to take a step way back and actually do some comparisons of the full decade. So spanning all the way back to 2009 when we hit the housing recession. We wanted to just do a comparison and see what's happened to the market between now and then, and a little bit of what the comparison was between, you know, what happened with COVID and a pandemic this year versus you know, when we hit, you know, full-on recession back in 2008 and 2009. Also, we think kind of taking that step back really helps put some context to some different things. You know, it really teaches us the change and growth and evolution. All of these things, they just take time, tremendous amounts of time, not to mention planning and perseverance. So why don't we pop into our first round here. So how did the painting industry actually do in 2020? Before I answer that question, just one quick slide before that, I want to give everyone some context. So we had a little bit over 400 contractors take the survey, and this is the breakdown of the size of the contractors who actually took the survey. I think that it helps give a little context to the future slides. So as you can see, the sizes of the companies, really the majority of them are living in the smaller contractors to the larger contractors. This year is actually the largest number of $1 million plus revenue that we've seen. So upwards of 30%, and actually most of the contractors who took the survey were certainly larger. So this gives you some context to the rest of the slides. This is not meant to represent the industry as a whole, because of course the people who read APC, the people who participate in surveys, don't necessarily reflect the entire market. So let's go ahead and dive into the nitty gritty here, the good, the bad, the ugly, it's the revenue trends. And this is the revenue trends through actually the last decade. And there's a lot of information on this slide, but basically what you're looking at here is you are looking at from good sales up to the left, all the way down to people who are experiencing a major downturn. And then all of these bars represent the varying years from 2009 to here we are at 2020. So you can see this crushing reality that people were experiencing basically in 2009. We actually only saw 3% of companies experienced any type of revenue growth in 2009, and this is right after, you know, the end of 2008 when the recession hit. And if you look, it actually took multiple years, you know, 2012, 2014. It's really not until 2016 that we start seeing a majority of contractors showing that they're actually seeing growth. Now here we are at the last gray bar here, 2020. I would say in January, I would have projected this number to be much higher, in the 75% range probably. And then if you asked me that again in March or in April, I would have said that I expected that to be much lower number. So all things said, it was definitely a worse year for revenue in 2020 than it was in 2018 and 2016. But we didn't fare as poorly as we were, you know, back in the recession years. You know, we've got here where sales are flat. We're seeing a little bit more kind of regular trends throughout the year. But the good thing is that we're actually seeing here in 2020, we have about 70% of contractors reported either no change in revenue or an increase in revenue. And I would say from what we were concerned about in March and April, I would say that that's a pretty decent number. We had about 12% of contractors who actually reported a major downturn in revenue and sales in 2020. Now, we haven't had the time to go in and look at who those companies were specifically, like where they were or what areas they were in. We'll be publishing that information in the December issue. But my gut is that we're probably going to see major metro areas seeing a harder hit after COVID than some of the other areas that we had. So next, let's take a quick look at 08 versus COVID. I actually just added this slide back in because I did think that it was a little bit interesting, just to show the difference between the two. We haven't been hit by a major recession that we were concerned about back in March and April, but here we are, at just under 50% of increases compared to 3%, and then over 40% of contractors are actually experienced a major downturn in the 08-09 recession versus 12% in 2020. So what are the most profitable markets? So this is a question that we ask every year, and this is just the 2020 results. The people who reported, so this is the number of contractors who have reported either their most profitable market. So residential repaint actually came out on top. Industrial commercial came in second. High-end residential came in third. New construction came in fourth, and decorative came in fifth. There's lots of other sectors that we have that we'll do in the December issue, but this is just the top 5 that we had. So we don't see tremendous changes, I wouldn't say year over year on this, but interestingly enough, because this is the residential forum, the place where we have seen some interesting changes in the last decade has been in the residential repaint and the high-end residential market. It's interesting, it's not necessarily shocking, but I think it's a good thing to visualize how these markets have changed over the years, and especially as the economy has changed. High-end residential was the moneymaker in 2009 and 2012. The majority of contractors who took the survey responded that was their most profitable market. But as the market recovered and demand returned in 2014, you see kind of the residential repaint market take over the high-end residential market as the most profitable spot for contractors. So we just thought that was an interesting little piece, and it sort of held on. Now, of course, we're talking about trends in this, so we're not going to do any forecasts into 2021 because, well, first of all, I've given up forecasting in 2020, but we did do an interesting survey with an economist from NAHB, and she does a really interesting kind of layout of what their forecast, what they're seeing now with new housing trends and people moving, and what they expect to happen over the next 24 months. So if you want to take a listen to that podcast, you can get that on paintmag.com, and it's called Housing Market Health Check. So next up,
excuse me, Emily, yeah. we do have a question.
Oh, great.
Yeah, Diane Walsh wants to know, is there a particular month that you conducted the survey in?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So the months that we did the survey was actually open between August and it closed just last week in November. So we did push the results that we were getting, I would say the highest number of results that we got were probably late October and November. So you're looking at some pretty recent data here.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? I meant to kind of stop and ask if there were additional questions as we go through these slides.
No other questions right now, so you can continue.
All right, great. So next up, one of the questions that we asked is what strategies people were using to either increase revenue or to make sure that revenue was staying pretty solid in 2020. And so our top 5 here, starting with the least to the most, one of the first strategies that people used to ensure that revenue was strong was creating more stringent pre-qualifying questions to decrease the cost of chasing leads. So really, this is about creating more time to spend time with the customers who are actually going to spend some good money with you. The next one is invest in more marketing. The next one was increased networking opportunities. I was a little surprised with this one because I think I personally, and I'm sure many of you, felt that networking opportunities decreased, but I also think the residential forum is showing us now how creative people are getting about ensuring that even though we can't physically be together, hopefully we're still communicating with one another. The next one, I thought this one was interesting. Increased prices was a big one. So we actually had 30% of people who took this survey said that they actually increased their prices. And then finally, the last one was took on more work. I'm sure that many of you saw this was not part of the survey, but kind of anecdotal from someone who has been following the market. We saw a lot of contractors close down and things get very quiet in March and April. But the kind of glimmer of hope that we started to see during those months is people were not canceling their jobs, but instead they were moving them. And immediately there became a question of, what are we going to do if the normal summer workload happens and everybody who was doing things in March and April simply move what they were doing? And we actually did see that, it looks like, kind of come to pass, in addition to what looked like even an influx in work. But of course, not everybody had tons and tons and tons of jobs to choose from. But some of the most common marketing tactics that we saw that people reported, this is always my favorite. The top one says none. So obviously we've got a lot of people with a good word of mouth and taking advantage of their network. But of course, that's certainly not everyone. Topping the list, we have websites. That's one of the top marketing tactics that people were using. Facebook at 12%, calling on clients, vehicle side advertising, meeting with contractors and facility managers. Online leads, this is one that's kind of interesting. If you look at over the decade, you kind of saw a spike a number of years ago, and then that's come back down. And then finally, we have networking groups was the final one here. Cool. Social obviously has been something that we've seen a lot more, and I can see I use C's instead of K's and TikToks there, whoops. But the most commonly used social platforms, obviously we've got Facebook at 96%. That's interesting because there are very few strategies in any space. I mean, it's something hitting the 96 percentile market is actually really quite incredible. So a lot of people using Facebook, Instagram at 47%, Twitter at 15%, and then we've got YouTube at 20%, Pinterest at 5%, and then we've got TikTok and Snapchat that are obviously still developing quite a bit. So next we're going to go into the challenges. There were a lot of challenges this year. So we had kind of the same old stuff, and then we got an extra little bonus that happened in 2020, obviously. And here we go. We kind of follow these again over the last decade. Employee hiring and retention. This was the #1 challenge that contractors have really reported for the last 2 operations surveys. But before that, the most common challenge that contractors were facing was low-priced competition. So obviously, you can see here we've got a market in 2009 that's not very good, and you see that everybody is fighting low-priced price competition, but not fighting the employee challenge quite so much. And then as demand increases, we have more hiring and retention issues, and just a smaller amount of low price competition, but that one always kind of remains a big challenge. Next, we've got scheduling and estimating profit. Those kind of stay relatively flat and around the 10 to 20 percentile for all of the years. And then this past two operation survey, we've got systems implementation pop onto the radar. So that's not something that we had ever seen before that. But if you think back to the first slide that I showed on the size of companies that we're dealing with, we're also looking at more companies that are $1 million plus who are likely working around the systems implementation. Next up, we've got, of course, I'm sure you're all dying to know what the bonus problem was in 2020, but of course it was COVID. Interestingly enough, and I guess this goes back to Diane's question about when the survey was done, only 2% of the people noted COVID as their biggest challenge in 2020. I do think that that's a timing thing. If we would have done this survey back in March and April, we would have had a very different result there. But we did have 2% of people who said that COVID was their biggest challenge of the year, and we did cover this a ton during March and April when we were kind of navigating a new business world in which some contractors were shut down, some were open, some were essential services, some were not. Some of the biggest questions that we got and some of the biggest topics that I think that we covered during that time, obviously it was the PPP applications. There were tons of questions relating to that. Once the PPP, of course, they were running out very quickly. Once that kind of all settled and people were getting their PPP money, we actually saw a lot of contractors say that they were moving to smaller community banks. When we looked at who was actually able to get the PPP loans and those people who were more challenged by it, it seemed to be the people who were working with larger banks and also didn't have quite the same relationship with their bank as the people who were working in more community banks. The next thing was creating a safety plan. So it wasn't actually just creating a safety plan, even though contractors were, they were in pursuit of more safety for their employees, for their customers, for all of that stuff. The image of safety actually became really, really important. So contractors took a long look at their safety plans. They added infection control protocols, and then they were kind of taking that information and ensuring that that information was relayed in their marketing material and making sure it was relayed on their website. One interesting thing that everyone was saying is that they were kind of rushing out to make sure that they got photos of their crews and their staff in masks so that they could put that onto their marketing material. The next thing that we spent a fair amount of time discussing and kind of fielding questions on was employment law. Obviously, the Families First Act left a ton of questions to be answered for the companies that were not closed down, but kids were at home or family members were immunocompromised or anything of that nature. There were just a lot of questions that surrounded what was okay and what was not. We actually called in some employment lawyers to help us go through some of the most common questions that contractors had on employment law. And most of it related to, when do I have to force people to stay home, and what is my ability to get people or push them to come to work if we have taken the proper infection control measures and all of that stuff. So that was a very interesting conversation. The next one was actually virtual estimates. So we had been talking about virtual estimates weirdly in January and February before COVID started, just because we were seeing more contractors add some forms and that sort of thing to their websites. In addition, we had done some interviews around PaintZen and PPG services, and kind of comparing the way that they were doing their estimates versus how contractors were doing their estimates. I think when COVID hit, that kind of turbocharged a lot of people who were not able to get out to homeowners. Either homeowners didn't want them there. We had a lot of contractors who didn't frankly want to be around people any more than they had to. So a lot of people were trying to figure out what their tech options were for doing virtual estimates. One really interesting video that we did with a contractor out in St. Louis was he was using Google Earth to actually doing measurements, to do measurements on the exteriors of houses before he got out there. Even once restrictions were lifted, we saw a lot of people who actually grabbed onto virtual estimates and found it as a way to save time and not have to constantly be driving here and there to do lots of different estimates. I think my favorite anecdote that I heard from anyone was them telling customers as they were giving them these virtual estimates that this is an estimate, it's not an exactimate. So there was an interesting communication hurdle that had to be overtaken there, just in communicating with people that without actually being there and seeing the rooms and seeing the state of the walls or the exterior that you were dealing with, that you needed A, the homeowner to be very honest with you, and B, you needed them to be a little bit lenient when you came out there if you found additional things that you hadn't actually been expecting. Those were really the big trends that we saw related to COVID. Did anybody, I'm going to pause here really quickly and see, did anybody have any questions around some of the COVID trends? Okay, I'm going to take that as a no and move right on. So this is probably one of the biggest trends. We've been tracking the number of contractors with websites and cell phones and smartphones. I know that sounds silly now, but keep in mind that we're going back to the early 2000s here. So we've been kind of watching that evolution, but some of the things that seem to have been a little bit slower on the adoption side is estimating software, time tracking software, even really accounting software has been slower than we probably would have expected over the last 5 or 10 years. And this was a year where we really kind of felt like we saw some changes. So far, this is what it looks like as far as the adoption that is current. So we've got a little over 60% of contractors who are using accounting software. We've got a little over 40% who are using estimating software, a little 35% using time tracking, 20% for CRM and communication and documentation software. And there at the end is we're seeing this production software. We're seeing a lot of really interesting things with new technologies coming onto the market that not only offer these things, but offer these in an all-in-one. I think one really big challenge that we've experienced, not only in this industry, in all industries, when you're working with lots of different technologies, getting the technology to talk to each other is incredibly challenging. We've heard a lot about Zapier and people using that to help with their back-end APIs. But generally speaking, I think a lot of people who are adopting technology, and especially if they were trying to do it in every single sector, found not as many time savings, not as much time savings as they really wanted, because they were having to enter the information into all of the different systems. It does look like we're finding our way around this. And then I think too, the natural progression towards technology was happening, but then of course COVID really just kind of turbocharged our move into technology. So one new question that we asked this year was how many people were expecting to adopt new technology in the next 6 months. So this includes people who have no technology currently and people who have some technology and are looking to expand, but then also the people who have technology that they've been using, but they're actually looking to update that information. So we actually saw more contractors are looking to adopt new technology. 51%, they're right on the margin, right on the line there. 51% saying yes, and 49% saying no, they aren't expecting to have any tech adoption here in the next 6 months. The next question that we asked was when people were looking to do tech implementation. This isn't a big surprise because obviously the market slows down in the winter, and so that really opens up opportunities for people to do any kind of new systems integration. But we saw almost 75% of people that if they are doing any kind of a tech rollout for their company, it's happening in either January, February, or March. So one thing that I think we've learned here is that technology is definitely becoming a really big opportunity for contractors to streamline their business. So that's really good because we've got our biggest challenge that we're getting ready to go into here, and that is employees. I'm going to stop for a second though because I saw a beeping 1 on my screen, so I'm not sure. Do we have any questions on the technology portion?
Anybody have any questions? Just type them in. Nothing is coming through, Emily.
Oh, I see one here. Oh, finding out the different ways that people are using technology and how they're integrating technology. Yes, funny that you should ask that question. We are doing a lot more on technology. So first thing that we've had is that you'll notice in APC, if you look through, and we started this in January, February, our very first issue was all about the future of paint, and it really focused on technology. So that's when we really started diving into this. And then we've done a couple of pieces on estimating software. We've done a couple of pieces on CRMs. We've done things on integration. We've done things on implementation, which is quite, it's varied. I think that's the best way to say it. Now I'm seeing a second question come up. Yes, so with all of this information, one thing that happened this year as we were watching this tech trend kind of unfold is that we were researching all of these articles, and it was taking us hours on hours on hours on hours to find all of the CRMs that were available, to find all of the estimating software and production software, to find out who was partnered and which ones you could build integrations with, to find which ones were kind of an all-in-one versus ones that had, you know, some of the production software and time tracking and CRM, but maybe not the same estimating. So one thing that we were doing, and I'll talk about this a little bit more at the end, is that we are going to do a Tech Fest here at the end of December. And that is really kind of an opportunity for people to group experience technology. What we're doing is that it'll be a 2-day session where you can, it is a virtual session. You can come in. We will be doing sessions on implementation, on budgeting, on determining how much tech you actually really need. And then we have demos that contractors will actually all go into together. You'll be able to demo the different types of software that are available. All of the software companies that are there actually have some kind of focus on the painting industry specifically. And you'll be able to ask all of your questions, but in addition to that, you'll be able to hear the different types of questions that other contractors are asking as well. And then we've got lots of networking opportunities as well, so that you can kind of talk to other people who are in your similar situation and learn a little bit more about that. Any other questions? Tony, I think you and I are getting, I don't know if you saw those questions or not, but any other questions on the tech portion?
I don't have any money anymore on my end.
Okay, gotcha. Well, we will go into kind of the final piece here, which is the employee challenge. Obviously, you know, if we go back to, if you remember what we saw at the very beginning of this has been the biggest challenge that the industry has experienced in probably the last 4 years. And we decided to ask a little bit more about what contractors were offering their employees as a way of just kind of getting an idea of what the benefit was to being a painter or actually working for a painting company. So I kind of broke this down by employee size because the ability to provide these different things really is in many cases dependent on the size of your company and the resources and the number of people that you need to do this for. So the first thing up is training. So as you can see, formal training programs, not surprising, actually increases as the company has more employees to train. So we've got 1 to 5 employees. We're looking at a little over 20% have a formal training program. And then we jump significantly when we get to 6 to 20 employees. Over 50% of contractors are offering a formal training program. Basically 21 to 100 employees, we're seeing the same numbers there. Just a little bit over 60% are offering a formal training program. This was a little bit surprising to me because I thought that this number at the 100 plus employees would be larger, but we actually dropped down to 55% of contractors offering formal training programs. Now, keep in mind also that we were not too strict about defining formal training programs in here. So this really is, formal training program is really up to the contractors who are answering this question. So moving on next, we've got benefits. So this, again, we were very broad in what we were asking. So benefits could really include anything from paid time off to 401k to health insurance to access to health experts. Really anything that you would consider, you know, a benefit for your employees. At 1 to 5 employees, obviously we've got a lower number at just under 20%. A big jump again once people hit that 6 to 20 employee marker, we start to see more offerings to employees. And then at 21 to 50, we're a little over 70%. 51 to 100 employees, we're just under 80%. And then 100 plus employees, we're looking at actually just under 80%. And then the final question we asked as far as what contractors were offering their employees was bonuses and or profit share. This has been a huge topic of conversation with us probably at the end of 2019 and going into 2020 is really kind of figuring out how to roll out bonus programs and how to, you know, whether that is a bonus for getting the job done on time and under budget, or if you're actually offering profit sharing to some of your employees. We've seen a lot of growth in how often it is offered again by companies who are a little bit larger, but really for this, it's a little bit less dependent on your size, simply because, you know, the whole idea behind the bonuses and the profit sharing is to get kind of that results-based attitude into employees to get a little bit more ownership from them when you're maybe not on the site. So here we are again. These numbers are also unbelievably similar across all 3 of those, but just over 20% in 1 to 5. Probably fewer people in the 6 to 20 staff range are adopting bonuses or profit sharing. 21 to 50, that's when we see our big growth that time. This time is over 80%. 51 to 100, 100%. Every single person with 51 to 100 staff members said that they are offering some kind of bonus or profit sharing. And then once again, we are dropping off in the 100 plus staff marker that we're seeing fewer of those companies actually offering bonuses or profit sharing. And here we are. That's but wait, there is more. We did have other questions that we asked in our operations survey, and we'll actually be taking a deeper dive into all of this into our November-December issue. We've got a nice 10-page article full with graphs and all kinds of different information that you guys can take a look at once that December issue comes up in December. So we hope that you all will read it. And that is all for now. Are there any other questions that we can answer?
There is a question from Stacy, but I don't think, Emily, you can address this, but it says, Stacy has a question. PCA was going strong on offering affordable health care, but I haven't heard anything about it lately. Where are they on that?
Yes, so actually we had heard the same thing, and I haven't heard a lot as far as updates on that goes. Hopefully that's something that they'll be able to clarify coming up in March.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, please type them in the chat box for Emily. Oh, okay, it appears there aren't any more questions. So again, I want to thank you, Emily, for your help and an excellent presentation today. And thank you all of the participants for your participation in today's webinar.
And
on
Tony,
behalf of,
if I
go
can
ahead.
pop in, I'm so sorry. Can I pop in and say one more thing?
Yeah,
as it relates
absolutely.
To tech, as it relates to TechFest, we spoke a little bit earlier. I want everybody to know that actually, if you're a member of the residential forum and you are interested in coming to TechFest, we're actually going to be offering a 20% discount to you all. So I believe Tony and Suhaiba will be sending out an email with a discount code for you if you'd like to join us at TechFest on December 9th and 10th.
Yeah, we will be sending that out to you all for that discount code. And again, thank you all for your participation. And on behalf of myself and the Residential Forum Board of Directors, may we wish you all a very happy and joyous upcoming holiday season, and enjoy the rest of your day and stay safe, everyone. Thank you.